me.
Can I just say I'm so sorry before you start?
Hi.
Hi, my name's Emma. I've worked with Shahina for many, many years.
Hi.
Oh, Emma.
Sorry, I get emotional.
Oh.
I've known Shahina for probably 20 years,
Oh, wow.
if not more, and she is the most amazing person I've ever worked with. So that's all I wanted to say.
That is very kind of you. And you and I are very good friends with Krista, who we both love immensely. That means a lot to you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think you're amazing. That's all.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Emma. I really appreciate it. And I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, and can I just go on? She even if she wore scrubs, she had high heels on every single day.
But I've evolved since then, Emma. I've become a little bit more sensible.
Have you? But she was honestly, I'm so sorry to interrupt this. She was the most calmest ever doctor ever. Oh, beautiful. That's all I'm just gonna mute myself now.
Oh, Emma, thank you so much for sharing that. I should have asked you to introduce Shahina in that case. That was amazing. You would have loved coming, amazing way to just introduce. So welcome, Jody. A few people have just joined as well who I can't see their names, but that's all good. And welcome all. I just want to introduce you all to the Healing Hub. Welcome. So very pleased that you are able to take some time out to share this beautiful space with us, where I get to introduce you to a wonderful, wonderful friend who I just met a couple of weeks ago. And I was so inspired by her story, and I just had to invite her here onto the Healing Hub so that we could learn from her expertise and learn from her experience, and perhaps even learn a couple of tips that we can, strategies that we can take on in our own life. So I'm very excited and thrilled to be here and welcome you all again the time to this beautiful space. Shahina, thank you for being here. And for those of us who haven't had the honor of meeting you, please would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us who Shahina is and where did it all begin? Where is it now and where is it all going?
Thank you, Shev. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, of course. Thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, I always feel a bit fraudulent with those introductions and then, beautiful words from Emma just then, who I think it's 25 years, Emma, that we've worked together. And I think one of the reasons I feel fraudulent is because I consider myself like a pretty ordinary human, and I'm not saying that to be modest and humble, but an ordinary human. I've had some amazing opportunities. I've had so much providence in my life in terms of opportunity and the people with whom I've crossed paths. So I guess what I'm hoping to do this afternoon in the short time that we have is just share one of the stories, probably one of the most profoundly impactful things that I experienced in my early career as an emergency physician, in the hope that that might be helpful to other people. Yes, so by way of background, I am an emergency physician. What that means is that I'm a doctor in an emergency department. I work here at Gold Coast at what is actually the country's busiest emergency department. I work with an amazing team of people. Health is very much a team sport, and emergency medicine is that amplified. And so I've been incredibly fortunate to have worked with some amazing people, nurses, doctors, allied health, security staff, cleaners, etc. And of course, to have intersected with so many patients and their families over that time. Sheb, did you want me to jump into my healing story?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay,
yes.
All right. So Sheb put a call out after a breakfast that we were both speaking at, asking if any of us might have a healing story to share. And I jumped forward and I said, actually, I do. So here's my story. I graduated end of last century, so at the end of 1997. And then, as is typical for a medical student graduate, you embark then upon your intern year, a couple of years as a junior doctor, and then you select a specialty, whether it's a GP or a hospital or clinic-based specialty. And I chose emergency medicine, which is a whole other story, complete unexpected choice even for myself. But I spent my first few years in Brisbane, and then in my second year of training, I moved down to the Gold Coast for probably mainly for family reasons. My parents and my in-laws were down here as well. And so I started work at Gold Coast Hospital, as it then was, at the old Nerang Street site. And it was, a old decrepit building and department, but a beautiful small hospital feel. And the staff here was so welcoming and warm and supportive. And it was a busy, messy place to work, as are most emergency departments. But I'd start the shift, it was busy. I'd end the shift, it was busy, no matter whether it was an early shift, an evening shift, or an overnight shift. And, that was what I was there for. Everyone was busy and everyone was pulling their weight. And I just kept trundling along like the diligent, methodical person that I am. And then in October, it kind of, it's like a wave unexpectedly washed over me. And I think what I recall many things about it. So even though this was 2002, I recall all of this quite vividly. And I recall that the physical fatigue was very obvious to me. As a doctor, I recognize all of those physical signs, etc. But what absolutely blindsided me was the psychological fatigue and the way that just kind of slapped me in the face from one day to the next. And so I remember it happened between a Wednesday and a Thursday. So it was Wednesday shift. It was about 7:30 p.m. I was due to finish at 8:30. And then we had 2 trauma patients come in. So I just stayed back at work just to help out. And I think it was maybe 10:30 by the time I got home. I was tired, and I thought I should shower and get to bed. But I just sat down for a few moments in the lounge room. The lights were off. And then completely out of nowhere, these tears started streaming down my face. And it was a weird experience because there were tears, but there was no emotion. There was no sadness or anger or resentment. There was, I think the best way I can describe it is there was just this emptiness and just the tears. And I thought, well, this is odd. And I stayed there for maybe 40 minutes in the dark, letting the tears come. And then eventually I thought, well, I've got to go back to work tomorrow, so I should go and sort myself out, get to bed, which is what I did. And the next morning I woke up thinking, well, that was weird, but this is another day. And I, diligently got dressed, had breakfast, headed off to work, picked up my first patient, walked into the cubicle. It was an elderly lady. She was frail. She had a few medical conditions and basically was just declining steadily at home to the extent that she now had an illness where she needed to just come into hospital. And I took the history and listened. And then at one point, her husband, who was standing next to her, an elderly man, he took a comb out of his top pocket and he leaned across and just tidied up her hair with his comb. And I don't know why or how or, there's no rationale behind this. But just that moment, it was like a switch was flicked inside of me. And again, the tears. I'm just standing there at the side of the bed and the tears were streaming down my face. And I think I said, please excuse me just for a moment. I went off to the ladies' room, splashed some cold water on my face. And then I came back and I said, I'm really sorry, please continue. And so then we continued the consult. And then I referred her for admission into the hospital. And I just thought, I don't think I can do 10 hours of this. And so I walked into the director's office. My director was away. And so one of the other senior consultants was there. They were all male at the time. And I sat across the desk from him and I said, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I can't stop these tears. And I feel sorry to him, sorry for him to this day, because, I didn't know what was going on. So he probably was quite perplexed as well. For 10 months, I've been quietly, diligently working away, not causing any problems. And now here I was sitting across the desk from him with the tears. And he just passed over this box of tissues and then suggested that I go home. which was a very good idea. So I did go home. I had a few days off. During that time, I had a course which this a specialist had offered that he could call and ask for that course to be postponed. But I said to him, I think it's going to stress me more to postpone it than just to get on and do it. So I did do it. It was a trauma course and completed that. And then I still had a couple of days off, luckily. So I thought I'm going to call up and just touch base with him and see what he thinks I should do next. And he, I said, I've got no idea what's going on. I'm still feeling a bit wobbly. And he said, Shahina, I'm really sorry, but you've got your night shifts coming up and I can't find anyone else to fill in for you. So would you mind please doing the night shift? And I said, yes, of course. Yes, no problem. No worries. I hung up the phone and I talked to my husband, who said, I really don't think you should be going back to work just yet. I said, oh, I'm fine. And he said, no, I really think you should have a bit more time off. I said, well, I can't because there's no one else to fill in. And my husband said, well, in that case, I think you should resign. And I was like, well, that seems kind of extreme. But Chris said, no, I think if your workplace doesn't value you enough to look after you at this time, I think they don't really deserve to have you there. And I thought, I didn't feel as strongly about it as he did. But I thought, well, it's probably not unreasonable. I drafted my resignation letter, very apologetic, to say, I will come and do my shifts, but as soon as it's convenient, might just, take a bit of a break. And then it was my mum who said, before you do anything like that, I think you should call your boss, who was away fishing. So his name is David Green. And I called David Green via switchboard. He was up in Darwin at the Barra Classic, where he spent a lot of his time. And I said, Greenie, I don't know what's happening to me, but I've got this emotional lability. I can't stop the tears and I don't know what to do. So I'm going to resign. And he said, Shahina, don't do anything. I've been where you are. I'm back in 2 days. Let's meet up for a coffee and we'll talk. And I'd said maybe 10 words to him up until that point. He's a tall, big-brained, big-headed, silver-haired man. And 2 days later, we met at a cafe and he said, I've been where you are. Again, you need to take this seriously. You need to take some time off. And I said, oh, I know, but I've got these night shifts to do. And as soon as I've done those, then maybe I can take some time off. And he said, what do you mean you've got night shifts to do? And I said, well, they couldn't find anyone else to fill in for me. And he said to me, that is not your problem. I will sort this out. You go take some time off and, we'll talk again when you're ready. And he said to me, just take this seriously, because he said, when this happened to me, there was this huge flow on ripple effect. And I made some choices that I wish I hadn't made. And you don't want to end up down that same road. And the second thing he said to me was, I think one day you'll do something really important with this. And to this day, I so appreciate that he recognized in me the need to make some intellectual sense out of this. And I'd like to think that, it was kind of prophetic, because 25 years later, I hope that I am doing something useful with it. So I've learned a lot of lessons from that, but I'm going to pause just to take a breather and let everyone else take a breather and see if you've got some questions, any particular direction you want me to take from here.
I think you're doing wonderful, Shahina, in terms of the advice that you had taken. Imagine, I wondered as you were explaining that, had he not said this, take this seriously, I wonder if you hadn't, where would you be right now? Would you have continued in your emergency medicine, or where would you have been? So that's what I was actually thinking. So the fact that this person came to you and pretty much reflected on that, I've been where you've been, where you are, take this seriously, and honoring where you were at and suggesting that you take that time off. How important is it to have someone like that in our life? How important is it, right, to have somebody who can acknowledge and recognize, time out, you actually are not doing well. We all should or could do with someone like that. Would you not agree?
Oh, 1000%, which people have told me that's not a thing. You can't 1000% something, but 1000%. And, he said to me, this is burnout. Recognize it for what it is. I have been there. And there were so many layers to what he did for me, which was number one, that message that if someone as amazingly competent and formidable as the director of emergency department, a middle-aged man, could say to me, I've been there, and I am, a functional, successful, respected person in the profession, then it's okay if you are there too, because this doesn't mean the end of the road. There's more steps beyond this. But also at that time, just to come in and rescue me with none of the other stuff is your problem. I want you to focus on you and let me carry everything else for you. Just two of the many, many things that he did for me back then. And he then continued to be my boss up until January this year. And it's been the biggest blessing of my career to have had him in that position.
Sorry, I'm just going to butt in here a little bit, if that's all right. Sorry, Shahina. I've heard that story before. And Dr. Green did the same thing to me. So when I became an MP, I was terrified. And he said, I want you to be scared, Emma, because that's what's going to keep you safe. And so that's all I want to say. But yeah, I know what he did for you.
Thank you, Emma. And just for the other people here, Emma is an amazing nurse and senior nurse practitioner now that I worked with a long time ago, but I guess we were together in our formative years back then.
Yeah, we were just babies, but that's okay.
Shahina, what you discovered about yourself 25 years ago and what this wonderful boss did for you, how did you then, taking what you know and what you've learned, how did you then apply that within that 25 years, perhaps so to yourself, maybe to others? How did you use those tools to perhaps for others? Did you recognize it in others, and did you perhaps make the same or similar suggestion to those people?
Yes, I of course took the nerdy approach. In my 3 weeks off, I embarked upon a literature search on what do we know about burnout, and I think mainly just occupied myself in a way that was familiar to me, which was using my brain, and maybe in a way that was trying to avoid facing the actual emotional side of things for a little while. I think my coping mechanism was, let me find out everything I can about this so that I can equip myself to contend with it. And so, I guess I learned a language around the whole wellness space, and then particularly in clinical professions that I hadn't been familiar with before. And then when I went back, and maybe this was providence that was granted to me by the universe, I just thought, just want to talk to people about this. I want to share my experience. And maybe what advantaged me then is something that I now recognize as perhaps some social capital. I'd had only 10 months in this workplace, but everyone had been so lovely. And I did feel a sense of support and probably some great mutual respect. And I think I felt safe. I felt safe to share my story. And in answer to your question, like, how do you support other people? I think start with you, I think, and not in a selfish, narcissistic way. But I think for me, it was just starting with, this thing happened to me in my second year of training, and it may apply to you or it may not. It may resonate with you. It may not. But if there's something going on for you that you think might be helped by talking to someone else, I'm available. And I'm hoping that that's what the message might have been. Because I think in probably most professions, but certainly in medicine, feeling that sense of struggle, then the temptation is to think if I'm struggling, then that's a sign of weakness or a sign of failure, maybe a sign of I'm not cut out for this. But what I've learned over time is that struggle is actually just a sign of being human, and it's a sign of being a reflective human, that you're a thinking, feeling human. And surely that's got to be a good thing in general, but particularly when you're in the business of caring for other people. And I learned that when you're struggling, being alone or being isolated is probably the most dangerous thing that can happen to a person. So I think if I could have one message, it would be to try and muster up the courage to connect with one other person. And for me, I had my family, but then I also had my boss. But whoever that one person might be for you, that you feel you could take the first step with and say words to the effect of, I'm really struggling. Hopefully the response that you'll get, because you've chosen the right person, will be one that, if nothing else, at least makes you feel seen and heard, like David Green started with for me.
I love that. And if there was that one shift in culture that you'd love to see in a high pressure workplace environment, what would that be?
Thank you. That's a great question. So one of the things that we embarked on then over the years, and it's been running for nearly 10 years now, we've got a kind of wellness program at work. It's called 1ED. I really like the idea of a wellness program because, you know, it's a lot of, in many people, it incites that skepticism or cynicism. But really, the program has one aim, and that is to just try and normalize the experiences that we have as humans working in healthcare. And there is a lot of joy, a lot of gratification, but there is, of course, a lot of sadness, a lot of devastation. And in amongst that, there is a lot of pressure to do the right thing and to do your job well. And in the ED, it's such a public space in which you're performing every single moment that I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to at least look competent. And so I think that one thing that I would love to see in terms of culture, and I think we are slowly getting there, is just this acceptance by all of us that that spectrum of human experience is all normal. All of it, from the successes to the failure, like that's all within normal human experience. And we need to not be so afraid or ashamed about those bits where we think we might be feeling a bit more vulnerable. It's to embrace vulnerability, I think, would be my big thing.
I love that. You mentioned failure. How would you define failure?
Oh, Sheb, how would I define failure? I guess the old me would define failure as, just lack of success and not achieving your goals. The new me, the benefit of being 51 and having had a lot of practice at failure, would probably now define failure as an absolute gift. It's a gift from the universe because failure is clearly what helps us grow. But I think failure is where we can most genuinely connect with other people because, failure is a common denominator, the great equalizer. No one does not have a story of failure. And I think it's a secret, link between all of us.
I love it. As you know, and not many people on this call knows, I'm in the workplace wellness environment. So I work with injured workers, and I wondered, I'm all about injury prevention strategies. I love to apply some knowledge and experience around that for people who are not aware of. But I wondered what daily or perhaps weekly practices that you have that has helped you maintain that perspective and that clarity around the whole wellness to prevent you from where you were 25 years ago.
Yeah, I embarked upon this, exploration of mindfulness some years ago. And the disclaimer, I suck at stillness. But what I loved about mindfulness was these forgiving, brief, actions that you could take as a reset. And I shared this at the breakfast some weeks ago, but the breath, and, I wish I could sit for even 3 to 5 minutes and breathe and focus on my breath, but I'm just not good at it, probably because I haven't had enough practice and discipline. But even just a single breath for me can be very recentering and, just bring my focus back into the current moment. But the other thing, Sheb, is, learning just to talk kindly to myself. And I know there's a lot of conversation around, I think women in particular, like we talked, the narratives in our own heads are conversations we would not have with even people we disliked. And, the way we talk to ourselves is sometimes just so mean and cruel and just unnecessary. And I've really got better at just being my own best friend, and just being kind to myself. I used to be really good at people's names, and with age and perimenopause, I've just become hopeless at it. And there was a new person at work the other day, and someone said to me, "Oh, his name is Pete." So I'm saying to myself, okay, that's Pete. His name is Pete. You're going to go up and you're going to say, "Hello, Pete. My name is Shahina." And like 5 minutes passed, and he approached me, and I just said to him, held out my hand, and I said, "Hello, my name is Pete." Again, the old me would have gone, "Shahina, you're so stupid. Like, what is wrong with you?" But the new me just burst into giggles. And I said to him, "My name is not Pete. Your name is Pete. My name is Shahina." And I actually just loved that I was able to just laugh at myself and just be a bit, not a bit, a lot kinder to myself than I would have in the past. So a single breath, and, kindness with humor towards myself, I would say.
I love that. I love that. Is there anybody on the call who has a question that they would love to ask Shahina? If so, please feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask a question. This is all interactive, so feel free to ask if there's anything you'd like further clarification, or perhaps you're wondering some other strategies or coping mechanism that Shahina might have. Anyone? Speak now or forever. We've got Heath. Yes.
Oh, hang on. Hi,
Hi, Heath.
welcome. Hey, thank you very, very much, Shahina, for your story and experiences and sharing those experiences. Particularly interesting from, I guess, such a position, such a powerful position that you have in that space. Yeah. Sheb knows me. I'm also in workplace rehabilitation as an exercise physiologist. And so part of my role is not just physical, but it's psychological as well. So that could be, say, secondary psychological injury just from being injured and being away from work and not being able to do the things that you love doing. And things like, work cover behind the scenes creating stress, and then the employer creating stress and all that other stuff. So we use the things that you've just used, like mindfulness and whatnot. I'm curious how the nerd in you went about exploring and connecting those things from a science point of view.
Yeah, thanks, Heath. Just to clarify, is your question like, how did I manage to reconcile, I guess, the relatively esoteric ideas of mindfulness, etc., with science? Yeah.
Yeah, almost like that spiritual sort of connection. How did we get from that being a spiritual thing, like yoga and all that sort of stuff, and how do you bring that to the modern day evidence-based practitioners, I guess?
Yeah, thank you. Awesome question, and also particularly important because as I've embarked upon trying to promote awareness, normalization in my co-workers who are very scientifically minded, it's been effective for me to have evidence base behind the kinds of strategies that we are promoting, and B, also can't remember B, but anyway, I'll be kind and humorous to myself. I can't remember B. It might come to me. But that was one of the reasons why mindfulness appealed to me so strongly. Was so I attended a 3-day course down in Sydney, and one of the things that really captured me that I thought then would be effective to try and engage my colleagues was the massive scientific evidence base behind mindfulness practices, whether that was, longer guided meditations or shorter practices like a single breath, or even mindfully eating a raisin, for example. And the fact that there were really robust methods by which they had embarked upon all of those things, such as functional MRI, etc. In monks, you're probably quite familiar with all of this work. And therefore, I was a fairly easy convert because I'm also pretty spiritual. But then when I came back and, tried to sit in a room with 40 other doctors and say, we're going to embark, I'm going to lead you in a 3-minute guided meditation. You can imagine that the first few times it would have landed like a lead balloon. But if I could say here's the evidence for why this might be useful, let's give it a try. It might have absolutely zero value for us, but it might have, a little bit of value for 2 of us. And that might be something worth doing. And then what I learned over time was that what we actually did in that time that we had together, whether it was a evidence-based guided meditation or just sharing a story, what we actually did probably mattered less than the fact that we were actually just pausing for that period of time and saying, hey, this matters. What we do is actually extraordinary. It is not normal. It is not normal to look after people who might have lost a limb, or to look after a family whose child has died suddenly and unexpectedly. It's actually not normal. And therefore, it is quite reasonable for us to have that spectrum of emotion, to struggle with it in the moment, to struggle with it months from now. And what we really want is 2 things. I'm going to remember both things now. A, for you to recognize that this is in the normal spectrum of human emotion. And secondly, that it's okay for you to talk about it. And we're all here to talk to each other about stuff like this.
Beautiful response. I hope that answers your question, Heath. Did you have anything further to add to that, Heath? No, all good. Thank you so much for that response. I can only just imagine. I've been in a very similar sort of environment with doctors and requesting some other sort of alternative approaches to treatment, such as mindfulness and breath work and that kind of thing, and it wasn't responded in the way that I hope to have received at the time. But thank you so much, Shahina. This is such a wonderful thing that you're doing, exposing the benefits of this kind of work in the workplace, so I'm really excited to see how you go with your project. Was it 1ED? One?
Yes, to the word 1 and then capital ED. Yeah. And I just see Jodie's unmuted. I actually know Jodie as well from a long time ago. And I was going to say before, I'm chuffed that Jodie joined in on time. I haven't seen Jodie in many years, but Jodie is affectionately known as Jodie plus 15. I don't know if this is still the case, but Jodie used to always be 15 minutes late to most things. So the fact that she dialed in at 12:01 is really, what's the word? It really means a lot to me.
I'm chuffed that you remembered that about me, Shahina. And I must say, I haven't improved that much, but today I did make it special. A special effort. It's quietly, but it's lovely to reconnect with you, and I really appreciate everything you've shared. I must say, when you mentioned being bedside with the elderly couple in the comb, when you mentioned the tears for a second time, I found myself, I've been teary throughout for the whole time of your talk. It's like, oh my goodness. So I think we do need to catch up. But just on what you were talking about then, in terms of, as Heath mentioned, just finding that intersection between, the mindfulness practice and the research. I've been following some podcasters like Sam Harris and Andrew Huberman, and they sort of, which you may or may not, I'm pretty sure you've probably heard of them, and they are sort of connecting those 2 together. I'm just wondering, are there any particular podcasts you listen to that or follow to help you in this journey?
Yes, the short answer, Jodie, is probably not currently. And certainly, when I was in that upswing of this movement for myself, I was, reading a lot and listening to a lot. Brene Brown is someone that I could listen to endlessly. And, she's done a massive amount of work, particularly in that shame space, which I think a lot of us, struggle with as well. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I know Sheb's got some resources on a page on her website where we can put down some resources. So if I think of any, I will. But I guess what we're talking about with Heath as well, like there's two layers to this, is how do we reconcile the science with that more esoteric spiritual aspect of this for ourselves? But then also if we're trying to promote this in our workplaces or with our colleagues, how do we get that credibility to try and engage them? And for me, one of the huge things was that, my older, more senior, in brackets, male bosses really incredibly graciously and generously kind of jumped on this bandwagon with me. I remember going into the handover once, and it was, when we were going to do our 4-minute pause, we call it. And I kind of looked at my colleagues and thought, can we do the pause? And the look that they gave me back said to me, Shahina, it is so busy. We need to get out there and we need to get on with work. But one of my senior bosses, David Spain is his name, but he said, the day we think we don't have time to stop and reset is the day we need it the most. And I could have said that, but it wouldn't have landed anywhere nearly as powerfully as it did because he said it. He was our deputy director. And, I could have hugged him in that moment because it was just so powerful. So I think apart from the science base, I think having some people who already have not just the social capital at work, but the actual respect and the seniority, if we can engage one or two of them, that really springboards our efforts.
Thank you so much, Shahina. One of the other ways and strategies that I love to implement, and this is something that I've used when I was recovering from an autoimmune disease a couple of years ago, which fortunately was able to resolve in 10 months, is crystal sound bowls. And it is one of my missions that I feel that I would love to introduce to as many people in as many workplaces as much as I can. And of course, what am I talking about? These little beauties here. So at the moment, I've got 3 sitting at my desk here, which I would love to invite you all to listen to as we, just before we sign off on our call. Now, crystal sound bowls, it gives us the opportunity to just simply be. I've often had clients come to me and say, what do I need to do? Nothing. You don't need to do nothing. And when we allow our time to be still in that moment and reflect on how we're feeling, and Shahina spoke about mindfulness. Mindfulness allows us to come from a space of observation. And when we are observing, we're not judging. We're not judging ourselves, the others, situations. We come from a place of observation. And I feel that this is part of what the crystal bowls offer, allows us to observe what's happening in not only our outer environment, but invites us to explore what's happening in our inner environment, in our inner world. And when the inner world is all aligned and coherent, we're more likely to then, show up for the world in a better way, and hopefully prevent these burnouts, these situations that could lead to catastrophic responses. So here's what I'm going to invite you all before we sign off, because I'm very mindful of everyone's time. I'm just going to invite you to explore what the sound of these crystal bowls are like, how they feel like. Now, if you are driving, please don't close your eyes. Just allow yourself to just enjoy the sound, but maybe not close your eyes. So if you are sitting in a sitting position, I'd like to invite you now to just get comfortable where you are, and just allow yourself to just take a deep breath in as I invite you and guide you to the beautiful sounding crystal bowls. And as you take a deep breath in, just allow yourself to relax and bring that awareness to your breath. And you might find that your mind begins to wander, and that's okay. Simply bring your awareness to your breath. And just allowing this time and this space to just be. To be in a state of stillness where you can allow your mind your body settle, allowing the trillions of cells to recover. Breathing relaxation and breathing out any stress or any tension. And just noticing what you're noticing, and noticing what you are not. You might notice the shoulders begin to relax, or your breathing slow and steady, and just allowing yourself to reconnect, realign your mind, body, and soul. Take a deep breath in, breathing in calm, relaxed, and just allowing yourself to sit in this stillness. And that you can allow yourself to be in this space at any place, at any time. Breathe. And take a deep breath in through the nose and breathing out any stress or any tension, and just gradually bringing yourself now back, ready to take on the day in perhaps more energetically, with more passion, more drive, with more energy perhaps. So I would love to thank you, Shahina, for joining us on the Healing Hub. I am so appreciative of your time. I know you have a busy schedule, for just sharing your story with us and offering your insights, for being the light for those of us in, who are experiencing some difficulties. I know that there's a few of us online, but I can only imagine who else can benefit from the recordings when we put this up on our socials. So feel free to share this. If you ever have anyone here have any further questions, please feel free to reach out. But is there any sort of final words of wisdom before we sign off, Shahina, that you would like to share?
I think embrace and celebrate vulnerability. It's a superpower. It might seem like a weakness, but I think it's a sign of accepting ourselves, and it's just so empowering to just release yourself into that space, and then so empowering for other people when we share it.
I love that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And take yourself a minute to just stillness. It's okay to not do everything all at once, and it's okay to take a moment to sit in stillness, whether it might be listening to crystal sound bowls, or whether it might be just listening to meditation music, or in nature, whatever that looks like for you. It's okay to take time out to reflect and be in the presence of presence. So thank you once again, Shahina, for your time, your presence, sharing your story. Thank you for all of those who have joined the call here for the gathering, monthly gathering. I'm so grateful for you all, especially you, Shahina. So thank you for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Very welcome. Have a lovely day, everyone. And it's bye for now. Bye.